I want to welcome you all to the Levy Economics Institute 29th Annual Hyman Minsky Virtual Conference. And as my letter indicates in the program, this year, this conference marks 30 years. Minsky first organized this conference 30 years ago, back in 1991, when some pressing economic issues required a public policy response. During that time, the American economy's financial structure was unable to cope with the continuing crisis of the S&L, the overexposure of banks with Latin America debt, the explosion of consumer and private and other private debt, the aftermath of a housing bubble, and the economy in recession, the result of a restrictive monetary policy aimed at reducing inflation. Minsky believed a conference like this would bring economists from the academy, the private and public sectors concerned with these issues to discuss, debate, and consider viable options for policy responses. 30 years later, we are confronted with a viral pandemic crisis and its implications around the world, both social and economic. In this conference, we are to consider prospects and challenges of the emerging recovery in the US and Europe after the COVID-19 crisis. We need to consider these challenges in some sort of a coordinated manner with other economies around the world. It has been more than a year since the COVID pandemic surfaced and affected all of us and the world at large. We continue to endure this crisis despite the showing signs of slowing down in some areas and countries. We are, however, still being challenged on many fronts because of the high infection, hospitalization, and death rates. And some of the important challenges are making vaccines available to all people, providing hospitalization and home care to the afflicted, protecting individuals for infections by imposing well-designed restrictions on activities, and finally and importantly, bringing back our economies and societies from the devastation the pandemic has caused to individuals, families, and communities. The extent of worldwide damage has been estimated by many for some countries to be even higher than that of the Great Depression. Estimates for 2020 placed the decline of GDP worldwide to be at a 4.5 decline, amounting to more than 4 trillion of lost economic output based on the 2019 world GDP of $87.55 trillion. Other conditions showing the catastrophic effects of the crisis include the loss of jobs, particularly affecting low-skilled workers who became unemployed, underemployed, and generally inactive, given the transformational change to new labor market arrangements focused on work done through digitalization. The ILO monitor reports the job losses as of the end of 2020 due to the pandemic to be 114 million, of which 81 million became inactive, and the rest 33 million increasing the ranks of the unemployed. The pandemic added fuel to the fire in the jobs market, where automation was transforming the world of work. The increasing use of telework is hurting low-wage workers and exacerbating inequality. If the pandemic accelerates the use of automation, we may experience a jobless recovery for low-skilled workers. Research by the IMF focusing on the adoption of industrial robots as a consequences of past pandemics, such as SARS in 2003, HIV in 2009, MERS in 2012, and Ebola in 2014, shows that new robots installed were increased, especially when the health impact is severe and when the pandemic is associated with a significant economic downturn. In such times, firms restructure their production modalities and adjust them towards technologies that lower labor costs. In addition, firms may prefer automation because health risks are minimal, if any. Robots clearly are not used everywhere and do not affect all workers in the same way. Low-skilled workers are more prone to displacement, however, unlike high-skilled workers, and this reinforces the dynamics of inequality. We can anticipate that following the COVID-19 pandemic, automation will intensify and transform the workplace, so more low-skilled workers would need to find new jobs. As a result, we would need to implement appropriate education policies and training to meet the demand for new skills. President Biden's proposed American Jobs Plan includes a variety of infrastructure investments, including social and digital infrastructure, that may help in designing such policies. Another issue relating to the viral pandemic is the worsening economic conditions that have contributed to the increase of the stock of corporate debt and the number of non-performing loans. The relaxation of the fiscal policy stance in increasing public expenditures has led to even higher debt levels of the public sector, creating a conundrum, especially for the countries borrowing in a foreign currencies, countries, for instance, using the euro. The loss of income, despite the limited emergency support in some countries, may have raised the stock of debt of households and businesses and financial institutions. The Global Debt Monitor of the Institute of International Finance estimates the surge of global debt, public and private, to have added $24 trillion, bringing it to a new high of $281 trillion at the end of 2020. The loss of income also decreased private demand, except for consumables and medical services and equipment. International trade has also been affected, and UNCTAD estimates that it will fall in the range of 9 to 10%, affected through supply and demand, and most likely take some years to return to the pre-pandemic level. These worsening economic conditions require government response. Government responses have varied significantly among countries. The US government and the Federal Reserve have responded boldly with a number of support programs and a general relaxation of fiscal and monetary policies, the result of which show a notable improvement toward regaining both employment and output growth. The European Union, however, in the usual fashion, even more than a year later since the beginning of the pandemic crisis, is still debating as to how, in what form, and at what level should provide support to the member states, save only for the Eurozone leadership suspending the Maastricht budget deficit rules until December 2022. Many member states, because of their high debt levels, such as Italy, Greece, and Portugal, will likely return to a new period of austerity, precipitating another financial crisis starting in 2023. Minsky's Keynesian conviction of the power of the big government and the big bank to restore economic health after an endogenous or exogenous crisis is once again confirmed. The COVID-19 pandemic has triggered a global depression. In times of such crisis, as Minsky was keenly well aware and advocated, economists and policymakers have a unique opportunity to challenge conventional wisdom and advance ideas that serve society and the well-being of its people. The post-pandemic emerging recovery must advance a healthy, resilient, and sustainable global economy for all. We hope the thoughtful presentations and discussion that will follow in this conference would contribute towards this goal. Here, those of you who don't know, at the Levy Institute, we focus on strategic issues of economic policy relating to achieving financial stability, long-term economic growth and higher employment in a period of low inflation and worsening income inequality. We invite you to review our publications available through the internet, and we very much welcome your comments. Before closing, I want to thank all the speakers, my colleagues at the Institute, especially Liz Dunn, for her tireless effort and extraordinary skill in handling all logistical and IT details of the conference, and especially the support staff of the IT department at Bard College. Thank you all very much for attending, and enjoy the conference.